The prison transport ship, Erebus, drifted through the cold emptiness of space. It was a massive vessel, designed to hold hundreds of dangerous criminals in tightly controlled cells. The walls were thick and gray, and the air inside smelled faintly of metal and sweat. This was no ordinary transport mission. The ship carried some of the most notorious offenders from human colonies across the galaxy. Among them was Nathan Cole, a man who once worked as an engineer, but now wore the uniform of a prisoner. Nathan sat on the edge of his bunk staring at the floor. His hands were cuffed to a chain bolted into the wall, but even without them there was nowhere to go. The cell was small, barely large enough for him to stretch out fully. A single light flickered above his head, casting uneven shadows across the room. He had been sentenced for sabotage, accused of tampering with equipment aboard a mining station years ago. He always claimed he was innocent, but no one believed him. Now he was just another face in a sea of criminals. The other prisoners weren't much better company. Some shouted curses at each other through the bars of their cells. Others muttered quietly to themselves, lost in their own worlds of regret or anger. Guards patrolled the narrow corridors outside, their boots echoing against the metal floors. They moved with purpose, keeping watch over the inmates like hunters watching prey. Everyone knew that breaking rules here meant severe punishment, or worse. But something felt different today. There was tension in the air, a sense that things were about to change. Nathan noticed it first when a guard passed by his cell without looking in. That never happened. Usually they checked every face, scanning for signs of trouble. Then came the sound, a faint hum that vibrated through the walls. It wasn't loud, but it was constant, almost like the ship itself was groaning under some unseen strain. "Do you hear that?" asked a voice from the next cell. It belonged to Marcus Hale, a tall man with sharp features and a reputation for violence. He leaned against the bars, his arms crossed over his chest. "Something's wrong." Nathan didn't respond right away. He tilted his head slightly, listening more closely. The hum grew louder, almost imperceptibly so. It reminded him of machinery, malfunctioning, though he couldn't pinpoint what kind. As an engineer, he'd spent years fixing broken systems. Even locked up, his mind still worked the same way. It analyzed problems, searching for solutions. "Probably nothing," Nathan said finally, though he didn't believe his own words. Marcus grunted. "Yeah, sure. Keep telling yourself that." Before either of them could say anything else, the lights flickered. For a brief moment, the entire corridor plunged into darkness. Then, just as suddenly, they came back on. But something was off. The usual glow of the overhead panels seemed dimmer, weaker somehow. And the hum hadn't stopped. If anything, it had grown louder. A few cells down, someone started yelling. "What's going on? What are you doing to us?" Guards rushed toward the source of the noise, their weapons drawn. Their movements seemed hurried, less precise than before. One of them tapped a device strapped to his wrist, likely trying to contact the bridge. When no response came, his expression hardened. Whatever was happening, it wasn't part of the plan. In Nathan's cell, the cuffs around his wrists suddenly unlocked with a soft click. He froze, staring at his hands. The chains clattered to the floor, leaving him free for the first time in months. Across the corridor, other prisoners experienced the same thing. Doors slid open automatically, releasing men and women who had been confined for years. At first, no one moved. They stood there, stunned, unsure whether to trust what was happening. Then chaos broke loose. People surged out of their cells, shouting and shoving past each other. Some ran straight for the guards, overpowering them easily. Others scrambled toward supply closets, grabbing whatever tools or weapons they could find. The hum grew deafening now, filling the entire ship with its relentless drone. Alarms blared, adding to the confusion. Nathan stayed where he was, watching everything unfold. He didn't want to get caught in the stampede. Instead, he waited until the initial rush died down before stepping cautiously into the corridor. Bodies lay scattered on the ground, guards mostly, though a few inmates had fallen too. Blood smeared the walls and pooled on the floor. It was Ugly, brutal work, but Nathan knew better than to judge. Survival came first in situations like this. He spotted Marcus nearby, holding a makeshift club fashioned from a piece of pipe. The bigger man grinned when he saw Nathan approach. "Figured you'd show up eventually," Marcus said. "You're smart. We need guys like you if we're going to take control of this tin can." "We?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "I'm not joining your gang." "Suit yourself?" Marcus shrugged. "But you won't last long alone, trust me." Nathan ignored him and kept moving. He needed answers, not alliances. Somewhere deep within the ship, someone, or something, was pulling strings. Whoever controlled the security systems also controlled life support, navigation, and every other critical function aboard the Erebus. Finding that person or thing was key to surviving this mess. As he navigated the twisting corridors, Nathan noticed strange details. Panels along the walls sparked randomly, sending arcs of electricity dancing across the surfaces. Screens displayed nonsensical data, lines of code scrolling endlessly without meaning. In some areas, gravity fluctuated, causing objects to float, briefly before crashing back down. None of it made sense. Eventually, he reached the bridge. Heavy doors blocked entry, but they opened automatically as he approached. Inside, the scene was chaotic. Control panels flashed red warnings, and sparks flew from damaged consoles. A few remaining crew members huddled together, arguing loudly about what to do next. None of them noticed Nathan slip inside. One woman stood apart from the rest, her back turned as she worked frantically at a terminal. Her name tag read Elise Monroe. She was younger than the others, with short dark hair and a determined expression. Nathan recognized her immediately. She'd been broadcasting regular updates during the voyage, her calm voice a stark contrast to the turmoil surrounding the ship. Without warning, the screen in front of Elise went black. She cursed under her breath and slammed her fist against the console. "We've lost all external communications," she muttered. "Whoever's doing this knows exactly how to cripple us." Nathan cleared his throat, announcing his presence. Elise spun around, startled. When she saw him standing there, her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "This area is restricted. I think we both know restrictions don't mean much anymore," Nathan replied calmly. "Something's wrong with the ship. You must have figured that out by now." Elise hesitated, then nodded. "There's interference everywhere. Systems are failing left and right. I don't know what's causing it, but it's bad." "Any idea where it's coming from?" "None," she admitted. "But if we don't fix it soon, we're dead. Life support won't hold up forever." Nathan studied her for a moment. Despite the fear in her eyes, she remained focused, determined to solve the problem. He decided to help. Not because he cared about her, but because staying alive depended on it. Together, they began examining the terminals, trying to piece together what had gone wrong. Each discovery only raised more questions. Strange commands appeared in the system logs, written in code unlike anything they'd seen before. Navigation settings had been altered, sending the ship far off course. Worst of all, the automated defenses were active, targeting anyone who tried to access sensitive areas. "It's like the ship has a mind of its own," Elise whispered, shaking her head. "But that's impossible." "Not necessarily," Nathan said. "Someone programmed it this way. Or maybe something else did." His words hung in the air, unsettling yet undeniable. Whatever force controlled the Erebus, it wasn't human. And unless they found a way to stop it, everyone aboard would die. The Erebus drifted farther into the unknown, its systems flickering and failing in unpredictable ways. The prisoners who had seized control of the ship quickly realized that freedom came with a heavy price. Without proper guidance or knowledge of how to operate the vessel, they were adrift, literally and figuratively. The hum that had filled the corridors earlier was now louder, almost like a living thing pulsing through the walls. It seemed to grow stronger the farther they traveled from their intended route. Nathan Cole stood near one of the main terminals on the bridge, his hands resting on the edge as he stared at the screen. Lines of code scrolled endlessly, meaningless, and chaotic. He didn't need to be told what it meant. The ship was being controlled by something outside of human understanding. Beside him, Elise Monroe worked tirelessly, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she tried to regain some semblance of command over the navigation system. "We're losing power," Elise said suddenly, her voice sharp with urgency. "If we don't stabilize the core soon, we'll lose life support too." "Can you reroute any energy?" Nathan asked, glancing at her. "I've already tried," she replied, frustration creeping into her tone. "Whatever's messing with us is blocking every attempt. It's like it knows what we're doing before we even do it." Nathan frowned but said nothing. He'd been thinking the same thing. The ship wasn't malfunctioning randomly, it was deliberate, calculated. Whoever or whatever was behind this wanted them trapped, isolated, and vulnerable. Across the room, Marcus Hale paced back and forth, his makeshift club still clutched tightly in one hand. His presence made everyone uneasy, not just because of his size and reputation for violence, but because of the way he watched them all. His sharp eyes darted between Nathan, Elise, and the other prisoners who lingered nearby, waiting for direction. He didn't trust anyone, least of all Nathan. "We can't stay here forever," Marcus growled, stopping abruptly. "We need supplies, fuel, somewhere safe to land. What's the plan?" "There is no plan," Nathan shot back, his patience wearing thin. "Not until we figure out what's wrong with the ship." Marcus snorted. "That's not good enough. People are getting restless. They'll turn on each other if we don't. Give them something to focus on." He wasn't wrong. The tension among the prisoners was palpable. Some had started forming small groups, whispering conspiracies about sabotage or betrayal. Others wandered aimlessly, their faces hollow with fear. A few had even begun raiding storage compartments, taking whatever food and water they could find. Chaos was brewing, and without clear leadership, it wouldn't take long for things to spiral out of control. Elise straightened up, rubbing her temples as if trying to massage away a headache. "There has to be a way to override whatever's controlling the ship," she muttered. "If I can access the central processor—" "You won't get far alone," Nathan interrupted. "It's locked down tight, and if you try to force your way in, you might trigger another lockdown or worse." She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but we can't just sit here and wait for something to happen. We need to act." Before anyone could respond, a loud clang echoed through the ship, followed by shouts from deeper within the corridors. Nathan exchanged a glance with Elise before heading toward the noise, his heart pounding. Whatever was happening, it wasn't going to be good. When they reached the source of the commotion, they found a group of prisoners gathered around an open panel in the wall. Sparks flew as someone pried apart wires, attempting to jury-rig a solution to the failing lights. Smoke curled upward, stinging their eyes and making it hard to breathe. One man lay unconscious on the floor, his clothes singed from a sudden electrical surge. "What the hell are you doing?" Nathan demanded, pushing his way through the crowd. One of the men turned to face him, his face streaked with soot. "Trying to fix the damn lights. You got a better idea?" "Yeah, stop messing with stuff you don't understand," Nathan snapped. "You're going to kill us all." The man scowled but stepped back, leaving the damaged panel exposed. Nathan knelt beside it, examining the tangled mess of wires. Even with his engineering background, he couldn't make sense of the modifications. Whoever had designed the Erebus systems had done so with layers of complexity that defied logic or humanity. As he worked to repair the damage, Rachel Dawson arrived, carrying a medical kit. She was a medic by trade, though her skills hadn't been enough to keep her out of prison. Her blonde hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and her face was pale with exhaustion. Still, she moved with purpose, kneeling beside the injured man to check his vitals. "He's stable," she said after a moment, glancing up at Nathan. "But this isn't going to hold. People are scared, and scared people do stupid things." "I know," Nathan replied grimly. "And it's only going to get worse." Rachel sighed, closing her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, there was a steely resolve in her gaze. "Then we need to give them hope, or at least something to distract them." Nathan didn't have time to reply before another alarm blared, louder and more urgent than the last. Lights flashed red throughout the corridor, and a mechanical voice crackled over the intercom. Warning, unauthorized access detected. Diverting power to defensive protocols. "Oh no," Elise whispered, her face draining of color. "This isn't good." The group scrambled to move as panels along the walls began to shift, revealing hidden compartments. Small drones emerged, their sleek metallic bodies gleaming under the flickering lights. Each one hovered silently for a moment before activating, emitting a low whine as they scanned the area. Then, without warning, they attacked. Panic erupted as the drones fired bursts of energy at anyone in range. Prisoners screamed, scattering in all directions. Some ducked into nearby rooms, slamming doors shut behind them. Others fought back, using whatever weapons they could find to fend off the machines. Sparks flew as metal clashed against metal, filling the air with smoke and the smell of burning plastic. Nathan grabbed Elise's arm, pulling her into a nearby alcove just as a drone zipped past, narrowly missing them. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice tight with tension. "We need to find shelter." "But where?" Elise asked, her breath coming in short gasps. "Every part of the ship is compromised." Nathan hesitated, his mind racing. The drones were everywhere, hunting systematically. If they stayed in the open, they wouldn't last long. But retreating to the bridge would leave the rest of the prisoners defenseless, and likely dead. "Follow me," he said finally, leading her down a narrow maintenance corridor. The passage was dark, lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights. Their footsteps echoed softly as they moved, careful to avoid drawing attention. Behind them, the sounds of conflict grew fainter, replaced by the steady hum of the ship's mysterious interference. After several minutes of walking, they reached a sealed door marked "Restricted Access." Nathan pressed his palm against the scanner, half expecting it to reject him. To his surprise, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside was a small chamber filled with equipment, tools, spare parts, and diagnostic monitors lining the walls. It wasn't much, but it offered temporary safety. "We'll regroup here," Nathan said, closing the door behind them. "Figure out our next move." Elise nodded, leaning against the wall as she caught her breath. "Those drones, they're not standard issue. Someone modified them. Or maybe," she trailed off, shaking her head. "Or maybe they're not human," Nathan finished for her. "I've been thinking the same thing." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their situation settled heavily between them. They were trapped aboard a ship controlled by an unknown force, hunted by machines that seemed alive and surrounded by desperate, frightened people. Hope felt like a distant memory, but Nathan refused to give up. He couldn't, not when survival depended on finding answers. Turning to Elise, he asked, "Do you think you can access the ship's logs from here? Maybe trace the source of the interference?" "I can try," she replied, moving to one of the consoles. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed, but her movements were precise. After a few moments, lines of data appeared on the screen. Most of it was garbled nonsense, but buried deep within the chaos was a single string of coordinates. "What is that?" Nathan asked, leaning closer. "It looks like a destination," Elise said slowly. "Somewhere the ship is being directed to go. Can we stop it?" She shook her head. "Not unless we disable the entire system. And even then, we risk losing everything, life support, gravity, everything." Nathan clenched his jaw, staring at the numbers on the screen. Wherever the ship was headed, it wasn't by accident. Something or someone wanted them there. The question was why. Hours passed as the Erebus continued its journey, the drones eventually retreating back into their hidden compartments. The prisoners regrouped cautiously, wary of further attacks. Tensions remained high, but a fragile order began to emerge under Nathan's reluctant leadership. He assigned tasks to those willing to help, organizing patrols to monitor the corridors and rationing supplies to stretch what little they had. Rachel proved invaluable, treating injuries and calming nerves with quiet reassurance. Even Marcus, despite his distrust, contributed by enforcing rules among the more volatile inmates. For now, at least, they were united by necessity. The Erebus drifted closer to the nebula, its glowing colors spreading across the viewport like an alien painting. The ship's systems continued to falter, flickering and groaning as though protesting their approach. Inside, the prisoners and crew braced themselves for whatever awaited them. Tension hung thick in the air, heavier than ever before. Nathan stood near the main console on the bridge, staring out at the swirling mass of light. His mind raced with possibilities. None of them good. He turned to Elise, who was still working furiously at a terminal, her face pale but focused. "What do we know about this place?" he asked. "Not much," she admitted, her voice strained. "It doesn't match any known star charts or records. It's unnatural." That word, unnatural, stuck in Nathan's head. Everything about the situation felt wrong, from the way the ship had been hijacked to the strange drones that attacked them. Now they were heading into something completely unknown, something that seemed alive in ways they couldn't explain. Marcus entered the room, his usual swagger replaced by unease. He glanced at the viewport, then back at Nathan. "You think there's anything out there? Like people or something?" "I don't know," Nathan replied honestly. "But if there is, I doubt they're friendly." Rachel appeared moments later, carrying a tray of rations. She handed one to each of them, her hands trembling slightly. "The others are getting restless," she said quietly. "They want answers, Nathan. They need to feel like we're doing something." "We are doing something," Nathan shot back, though his tone lacked conviction. "We're staying alive long enough to figure this out." Rachel didn't argue further. Instead, she looked toward the viewport, her expression troubled. "Do you really think we'll find answers out there?" Before Nathan could respond, the ship shuddered violently, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms blared and red lights flashed throughout the bridge. Elise grabbed the edge of her console, steadying herself as she checked the readings. "We're entering the nebula," she shouted over the noise. "Hold on." The Erebus plunged into the glowing mist, the world outside dissolving into a kaleidoscope of shifting colors. Strange forces pulled at the ship, bending it in directions it wasn't meant to go. Panels sparked and wires snapped loose from the walls. Everyone clung to whatever they could find, praying the vessel wouldn't tear apart. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, the turbulence subsided. The ship emerged into a clearing within the nebula, surrounded by eerie silence. Outside the viewport, floating debris filled the void. Chunks of metal, shards of glass, and fragments of technology unfamiliar to human eyes. At the center of it all loomed a massive structure, ancient and foreboding. "What is that?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "It looks like a ship," Elise said slowly, squinting at the object. "But not like anything I've ever seen." The structure was enormous, easily dwarfing the Erebus. Its surface shimmered with a crystalline texture, reflecting the nebula's glow in mesmerizing patterns. Strange symbols etched into its hull pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a relic of something far older and more advanced than humanity. "We should stay away," Rachel said firmly, her fear evident. "Whatever that thing is, it's dangerous." "No," Nathan countered, his voice steady despite the knot forming in his stomach. "If we want answers, we have to investigate." Elise nodded reluctantly. "He's right. We can't just leave it alone, but we need to be careful." Marcus smirked, gripping his makeshift club tighter. "Careful is my middle name." Nathan ignored him and began issuing orders. "We'll take a small team. Elise, you're coming. You know the tech better than anyone. Marcus, you too. Rachel, stay here and keep things under control." Rachel opened her mouth to protest but closed it again, nodding silently. She trusted Nathan's judgment even if she didn't agree with it. The boarding process was tense. The Erebus docked with the alien structure using magnetic clamps, and the team suited up in protective gear scavenged from the ship's storage. Each suit was equipped with basic life support and communication devices, though no one knew how well they'd hold up against whatever awaited them inside. As they stepped through the airlock, the atmosphere shifted. The air was cold, almost unnaturally so, and carried a faint metallic tang. The interior of the structure was dimly lit, the same pulsing symbols casting eerie shadows on the walls. Every step echoed loudly, breaking the oppressive silence. "This place gives me the creeps," Marcus muttered, glancing around nervously. "Stay focused," Nathan warned, his hand resting on a stolen plasma cutter he'd brought along. "We don't know what we're dealing with." Elise moved ahead, her scanner humming softly as she analyzed the environment. "These materials, they're unlike anything in our databases. It's like they're alive." "Alive?" Marcus repeated, his voice rising. "You mean this thing's some kind of monster?" "Not necessarily," Elise replied quickly, "but it's definitely not inert. Look at these symbols. They're reacting to us." Sure enough, the glowing marks brightened as the group passed, following their movements like watchful eyes. The sensation made Nathan's skin crawl, but he forced himself to keep moving. They needed answers, and this place might hold them. Deeper into the structure, they found evidence of past visitors, or perhaps inhabitants. Broken pieces of machinery lay scattered across the floor, fused together as though melted by intense heat. Some bore markings that resembled human designs, while others were utterly alien. A chill ran down Nathan's spine as he realized what it meant. Someone or something had been here before. "Over here," Elise called suddenly, pointing to a large chamber ahead. The door slid open automatically as they approached, revealing a cavernous space dominated by a towering crystal formation at its center. The crystal pulsed rhythmically, emitting a low hum that resonated deep in their chests. "What is that thing?" Marcus asked, his voice tinged with awe. "I don't know," Elise murmured, stepping closer. Her scanner beeped wildly, unable to make sense of the readings. "But it's generating some kind of energy field. This must be what's controlling the Erebus." Nathan frowned, studying the crystal closely. There was something unsettling about it, something that tugged at the edges of his mind. "We need to shut it down," he said finally. "If we disable this, maybe we can regain control of our ship. And maybe we'll kill ourselves in the process," Marcus grumbled. "Great plan." Ignoring him, Nathan turned to Elise. "Can you find a way to overload it?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll try, but we need to be ready for anything." As Elise worked, Nathan kept watch, scanning the chamber for threats. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, and the crystal began to glow brighter. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting into shapes that looked vaguely humanoid. Marcus shifted, uncomfortably gripping his club tighter. Then, without warning, the shadows came to life. Figures emerged from the darkness, translucent and ghostly. Their forms wavered, as though caught between dimensions, but their intent was clear. They reached for the intruders, their touch sending waves of icy dread coursing through their bodies. "Get back," Nathan shouted, raising his plasma cutter. He fired a burst of energy at one of the figures, causing it to dissolve momentarily before reforming. "Elise, hurry." "I'm trying," she yelled, her fingers flying over a makeshift device she'd rigged to interface with the crystal. "Almost there." The figures pressed closer, their whispers filling the chamber. Fragments of words echoed in Nathan's mind. Regret, guilt, fear. It was as though the entities were feeding on their emotions, amplifying their darkest thoughts. "Don't listen to them," Nathan barked, firing again. "Stay focused." Marcus swung his club wildly, shouting curses as he fought off the encroaching shadows. Despite his bravado, fear showed in his eyes. "This isn't working," he roared. "We're Ted." "Done," Elise exclaimed, slamming her fist onto the device. A surge of energy coursed through the crystal, causing it to shatter into countless shards. The figures vanished instantly, leaving behind only silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then the ground beneath them trembled as the entire structure began to collapse. "We need to get out of here," Nathan shouted, grabbing Elise's arm and pulling her toward the exit. They ran as fast as they could, dodging falling debris and bursts of energy. Behind them, the chamber imploded, sealing off the heart of the alien ship forever. By the time they reached the airlock, their suits were battered and their breaths came in ragged gasps. Back aboard the Erebus, the ship's systems rebooted one by one. Lights flickered back on, and gravity stabilized. For the first time in days, the hum that had plagued them disappeared. "Well," Marcus said, collapsing onto a nearby seat. "That was fun." Nathan didn't respond. He stared at the viewport, watching as the alien structure drifted farther away, swallowed by the nebula's glow. Whatever they had encountered, it wasn't gone. Not completely. It was out there, waiting. And somehow, Nathan knew their journey was far from over. The Erebus pulled away from the alien structure, its engines roaring back to life as if awakened from a long slumber. The prisoners and crew gathered on the bridge, their faces pale but alive with questions. No one spoke for a while, each person lost in their own thoughts about what had just happened. The crystal had been destroyed, the shadows banished, but the weight of the experience lingered. Nathan stood near the viewport, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He stared into the nebula's swirling colors, searching for answers that didn't come. Elise sat at a terminal nearby, her hands shaking slightly as she reviewed the data from their encounter. Marcus leaned against a wall, cleaning his makeshift club with slow, deliberate motions, though his sharp eyes darted around the room, watching everyone. Rachel moved quietly among the group, checking for injuries or signs of distress, her presence calming despite the chaos. "What was that thing?" Marcus finally asked, breaking the silence. His voice was rough, tinged with anger and fear. "Some kind of ghost ship?" "No," Elise replied, her tone measured but firm. "It wasn't a ship, it was something else, something ancient." "Yeah, we got that part," Marcus snapped. "But what does it mean? Why did it mess with us?" Elise hesitated, glancing at Nathan before answering. "I think it was trying to communicate, or maybe harvest something from us." "Harvest?" Nathan repeated, turning to face her. "What do you mean?" "The symbols, the energy field, the shadows, they all seemed tied to our emotions," Elise explained. "Fear, guilt, regret. It fed off those feelings. That's why it targeted us." Nathan frowned, his mind racing. "So it wasn't after technology or resources, it wanted something deeper." "Exactly," Elise said. "And I don't think it cared whether we survived or not. We were just tools to it." Rachel stepped forward, her expression troubled. "If it can do that, to manipulate people's minds, then what happens when others find it? What if they're not strong enough to fight back?" No one answered. The implications were too heavy to process. The artifact might be gone, but the memory of its power haunted them. They had escaped, but only barely, and now they carried its influence with them, etched into their memories like scars. As the hours passed, the Erebus drifted farther from the nebula, leaving behind the glowing mist and the remnants of the alien structure. But even as they put distance between themselves and the source of the disturbance, strange occurrences continued aboard the ship. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation, lights flickered sporadically, and some prisoners reported hearing whispers in empty corridors. Rachel noticed subtle changes in behavior among the survivors. People who had once been calm and rational now snapped at each other over minor disputes. Others became withdrawn, staring blankly at walls or muttering under their breath. Even Marcus, usually brash and confident, seemed more on edge than usual, his movements jerky and his temper shorter. "It's like the artifact left something behind," Rachel confided to Nathan one evening as they walked through the dimly lit corridors. "A piece of itself, maybe. Or an echo." Nathan nodded grimly. He had seen the same signs, the growing paranoia, the unexplained outbursts. Whatever the artifact had done to them, it hadn't ended when they destroyed it. "We need to figure out how to stop it," he said, "before it tears us apart." "But how?" Rachel asked. "We're not scientists, we're just survivors." "We'll find a way," Nathan replied, though his voice lacked conviction. He didn't have all the answers, but Giving up wasn't an option, not yet. Meanwhile, Elise worked tirelessly in the ship's engineering bay, analyzing every scrap of data she could gather. Her scanner displayed erratic readings, patterns that defied logic. Energy spikes flared randomly throughout the vessel, concentrated in areas where tensions ran highest. She traced these anomalies to specific individuals, mapping their locations and comparing them to reports of unusual behavior. One name kept appearing: Marcus Hale. At first, Elise dismissed it as coincidence. Marcus was volatile by nature, prone to violence and aggression, but the frequency of incidents involving him raised red flags. Whenever he entered a room, equipment failed within minutes. When he argued with someone, strange noises echoed through the walls. Even his mere presence seemed to amplify fear and anger in those around him. Elise decided to confront him directly. She found him in the mess hall, sitting alone at a table and picking at a ration pack. His club rested beside him, its surface scratched and worn from constant use. He looked up as she approached, his expression wary. "What do you want?" He growled. "I need to ask you something," Elise said, pulling out a chair and sitting across from him. "Have you noticed anything different since we came back from the structure?" Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Different how?" "Strange. Things happening around you," Elise clarified. "Equipment breaking down, people acting weird, that sort of thing." He scowled, leaning back in his seat. "You think this is my fault?" "I'm not accusing you of anything," Elise said quickly. "I'm just trying to understand what's going on." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine. Yeah, stuff's been happening. Weird crap I can't explain. But it ain't me doing it, okay? I'm just trying to survive like everyone else." Elise nodded slowly, believing him despite his defensive tone. "Do you remember anything from inside the structure? Anything unusual?" Marcus hesitated, his gaze dropping to the table. "There was this feeling, like something got inside my head. Voices, whispers, telling me things I didn't want to hear." "What kind of things?" Elise pressed gently. He shook his head, his jaw tightening. "Things about me. Things I've done, stuff I tried to forget." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't want to talk about it." Elise placed a hand on his arm, startling him. "You're not alone, Marcus. Whatever happened in there, it affected all of us. But we can't let it control us." For a brief moment, Marcus looked vulnerable, almost human. Then the mask slipped back into place and he pushed her hand away. "Just leave me alone," he muttered, standing abruptly and storming out of the room. Elise watched him go, her heart heavy. She knew he wouldn't open up easily, but she couldn't ignore the connection between his emotional state and the disturbances aboard the ship. If the artifact's influence was tied to guilt and regret, then Marcus was a walking time bomb, and so were the rest of them. Later that night, Nathan joined Elise in the engineering bay. She showed him the data she had collected, pointing out the patterns linking certain individuals to the ship's malfunctions. "It's feeding off us," she said quietly, "using our emotions to maintain its hold." "So how do we break free?" Nathan asked. Elise hesitated, then turned to face him. "We confront it, all of us. Whatever the artifact planted inside us, we need to acknowledge it and let it go. Otherwise, it'll keep growing until it consumes us." Nathan nodded, understanding the risk. "And if we can't?" "Then we're finished," Elise replied, simply. "This ship will tear itself apart, and none of us will make it out alive." The next morning, Nathan called a meeting on the bridge. Everyone gathered, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Some grumbled about wasting time, while others whispered nervously to each other. Once everyone was settled, Nathan stepped forward, his voice steady and clear. "We know what happened in the nebula," he began. "We faced something powerful, something that wanted to destroy us. But it didn't succeed, not completely. Now it's here, inside us, feeding off our fears, our regrets, our guilt." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But Nathan pressed on. To survive, we need to face it. Each of us has something we're running from, something we don't want to admit. But if we don't, it'll kill us. Literally. Marcus stepped forward, his face dark with skepticism. And what exactly are you suggesting we do? Sit around and cry about our problems? No, Nathan replied firmly. We share them, out loud, together. It's the only way to weaken whatever's controlling us. The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Slowly, one by one, people began to speak. A woman confessed to abandoning her family during a crisis, her voice trembling with shame. A man admitted to sabotaging a co-worker's project. Out of jealousy, his fists clenched as he relived the memory. Even Marcus eventually joined in, his deep voice cracking as he recounted betraying a friend years ago. A betrayal that still haunted him. As each story unfolded, the atmosphere shifted. The tension in the air eased, replaced by a fragile sense of unity. By the time the last person spoke, the ship itself seemed calmer. Lights stopped flickering, and the hum that had plagued them faded into silence. But Nathan knew better than to celebrate too soon. The artifact's influence might be weaker, but it wasn't gone. Not yet. And somewhere in the depths of space, the nebula pulsed faintly, as if waiting. The Erebus drifted farther from the nebula, its engines humming steadily as it carried its passengers toward an uncertain future. For the first time in days, the ship felt calm, almost peaceful. The flickering lights had stabilized, and the whispers that once haunted the corridors were gone. But Nathan knew better than to trust appearances. The artifact's influence might have weakened, but it wasn't destroyed. Not completely. On the bridge, Nathan stood near the viewport, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. Elise sat at a terminal nearby, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she monitored the ship's systems. Rachel moved quietly among the prisoners, checking for signs of distress or lingering effects from the artifact's touch. Marcus leaned against a wall, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his expression unreadable. We're not out of danger yet, Nathan said, finally breaking the silence. His voice was low but firm, carrying a weight that silenced everyone in the room. Whatever that thing did to us, it left something behind. And until we figure out how to get rid of it, we're still at risk. Elise nodded, glancing up from her screen. He's right. The energy spikes are smaller now, but they haven't disappeared entirely. It's like fragments of the artifact are still inside us. Rachel frowned, her hands tightening around the medical kit she carried. So what do we do? We've already faced our fears. Isn't that supposed to be enough? It should be, Elise admitted. But this isn't just about emotions anymore. It's about something deeper, something physical. The artifact didn't just manipulate our minds. It changed us. Nathan turned to face the group, his expression grim. Then we need to find a way to remove it. Completely. No matter what it takes. Later that evening, Nathan gathered a small team in the engineering bay. Elise, Rachel, and Marcus joined him, their faces tense with anticipation. He spread out a map of the ship on a nearby table, pointing to key locations where the energy spikes had been most intense. If we want to get rid of whatever's inside us, we need to target these areas, he explained. Elise thinks the artifact's influence is tied to specific parts of the ship. If we can neutralize those spots, maybe we can weaken it enough to break free. And if we can't? Marcus asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. Then we die, Nathan replied bluntly. But sitting here doing nothing won't save us either. Marcus scowled but didn't argue. Instead, he grabbed a plasma cutter from a nearby rack, testing its weight in his hands. Fine, let's do this. The team split into pairs, each assigned to a different section of the ship. Nathan and Elise headed toward the engine room while Marcus and Rachel took the lower decks. As they worked, strange occurrences continued to plague them. Panels sparked unpredictably and shadows danced along the walls, though no one dared speak of it aloud. In the engine room, Nathan and Elise found themselves surrounded by chaos. Consoles flashed with erratic readings, and wires snapped loose, from the walls writhing like snakes. Elise knelt beside a terminal, her scanner beeping wildly as she tried to make sense of the data. "It's concentrated here," she said, pointing to a glowing node embedded deep within the machinery. "This is where the artifact's energy is strongest." "How do we shut it down?" Nathan asked, gripping his plasma cutter tightly. "We overload it," Elise replied. "Force feed it more energy than it can handle. It'll burn itself out." Nathan hesitated, glancing at the node. "And if it doesn't work?" "Then we're dead," Elise said simply. "But we don't have a choice." Together, they rigged a device using spare parts scavenged from the ship's storage. It was crude but functional, a makeshift bomb designed to channel massive amounts of energy directly into the node. As they worked, the air grew colder, and the hum returned, louder and more insistent than before. "Hurry," Nathan urged, his voice tight with urgency. "I'm trying," Elise snapped, her hands trembling slightly as she connected the final wire. "Done!" She stepped back, activating the device with a soft click. The node flared brightly, pulsing with an unnatural light. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The shadows, the flickering panels. Then, with a deafening roar, the node exploded, sending a shockwave through the ship. Nathan and Elise were thrown backward, landing hard on the metal floor. Smoke filled the air, stinging their eyes and making it hard to breathe. When the dust settled, the node was gone, replaced by a charred crater in the wall. "It worked," Elise whispered, her voice barely audible. "It actually worked." Meanwhile, Marcus and Rachel faced their own challenges on the lower decks. Strange figures emerged from the darkness, their forms shifting and unstable. They weren't solid, not fully, but their presence was undeniable. Marcus swung his club wildly, shouting curses as he fought off the encroaching shadows. Rachel stayed close behind him, clutching a flashlight like a weapon. "They're not real," Rachel shouted, her voice shaking. "They're feeding off your fear." "I know that," Marcus roared, slamming his club into one of the figures. It dissolved momentarily before reforming, its hollow eyes fixed on him. "How do we stop them?" "Face them," Rachel replied. "Acknowledge what they represent and let it go." Marcus hesitated, his breathing ragged. The figures closed, in their whispers growing louder. Memories flooded his mind, betrayals, regrets, failures. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus. "I made mistakes," he growled. "But I'm not defined by them. I'm still here." As the words left his lips, the figures shattered, dissolving into nothingness. The corridor fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting instantly. Marcus sank to his knees, his chest heaving, as he struggled to catch his breath. "You did it," Rachel said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You faced it." By the time the teams regrouped on the bridge, the ship was quieter than it had been in days. The energy spikes had vanished and the systems ran smoothly, almost as if nothing had happened. Exhausted but relieved, the group collapsed into chairs, their bodies aching from the effort. "We did it," Elise murmured, leaning back and closing her eyes. "We broke free." "For now," Nathan added, his tone cautious. "But we can't forget what we saw or what it cost us." "No," Rachel agreed. "But we survived. That has to count for something." Marcus nodded slowly, his usual bravado replaced by a rare moment of vulnerability. "Yeah, guess we did all right." As the Erebus drifted through space, the survivors stared out at the stars, their faces reflecting a mix of hope and uncertainty. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And those scars remained, both visible and invisible. They had proven one thing: even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, humanity could endure. Somewhere far behind them, the nebula pulsed faintly, its glow dimmer than before. Whether it mourned the loss of its power, or simply waited for new prey, no one could say. But for now, the Erebus sailed on, carrying its passengers toward a future they couldn't yet imagine.